Good morning from WKYT News. I'm Bill Bryant, and we welcome you to Kentucky Newsmakers. Later, the rising value of homes in Lexington is also causing a spike in property tax bills. We'll hear from the Fayette County PVA, David O'Neill, a little later. But first, Kentucky Senate President Robert Stivers is here. There's no argument. He is one of the most powerful people in Frankfort, and the legislative session that just ended was consequential. The legislature passed a two-year budget of more than 100 laws as well, including a sweeping crime act, and he directs the flow of legislation in the Senate. It can be a challenge to wrangle members of his Republican caucus who come from urban and rural areas and from different backgrounds. Stivers has served in the legislature nearly 3 decades, winning his seat for the first time in 1996. He's from Manchester, represents the 25th Senate District. That includes all or parts of Clay, Jackson, Knox, McCrary, Owsley, and Whitley counties. Stivers is unopposed for re-election. President Stivers, welcome. We appreciate you coming in.
Glad to be here, Bill.
Well, you have talked about the session a lot. Do you believe the 2024 legislative session was productive and will move Kentucky forward?
Actually, it's probably the best session from that perspective because we were fiscally responsible over the last several years, going through some tough times with COVID and other things. And because of good management, we had a lot of excess monies, and I'm not purely because of us. There's other outside influences, both positive and negative, but overall we did a really good job, and I think we invested wisely throughout the state, and I think it'll make a big difference over the next few years.
And you've roundly praised the budget, that two-year spending plan. It contains a lot of one-time spending for projects. What are some of those that you believe will make a big difference in the Commonwealth, and particularly in our viewing areas, you know?
Well, I think maybe one of the most significant things, and let's start here in Fayette County. A lot of people will look at the general fund budget, but I think they also need to look at the transportation budget, which by Constitution is segregated. When you think about the road going out to Georgetown, going to get, I think, $25 million to expand that. And the way the population contracts and expands here in Fayette County, because it's a regional hub for work, you know, that's a lot more people here in the daytime than there is in the nighttime. So the transportation budget, even right here, there's a lot of dollars that are there. The homeless issue, a lot of people are aware of the Transylvania purchase and the money we put in to match that. That's another big issue for various reasons, has multiple tentacles.
That is to build affordable housing off North Broadway.
Yes, the land that was purchased, I think, from the University of Transylvania, or Transylvania University. I think Luther Deaton and some of the bankers kind of spearheaded that. Amanda Bledsoe was one of them that really kind of went out and said, we need to match that up, and brought the dollar figure to us. But that does a lot of things for homeless, public health, safety, and tourism, because you can't have a really good tourism industry if you have a large homelessness issue.
Other projects, I know Northern Kentucky is going to see some, including the fact that the Chase Law School will move into a new facility.
Yeah, and that's kind of dynamic, and we really tried to do dynamic things. And I'll give you one to the north and one to the south. You think about this innovation center, which is going to bring together the law school and medical research in one spot, where a lot of people in Northern Kentucky are aware. It used to be the old IRS building. That's where they're going to build this and put this, and it's a combination of law and medical and technology coming together in the two universities, UK and Northern, forming that partnership to make a really good, as it says, innovation center. To the south, let's talk about EKU and the one of the few aviation accredited classes. We're putting $25 million into that regional airport, and I think Congressman Barr is putting some extra money and some road money to make that really a hub for education and economic development. That's with the EKU flight program and the potential and the growth in Madison County. It made sense to put that in there, and it has a twofold impact.
The two-year budget did not guarantee teachers raises. It did give significantly more money to schools, and they have to make the choice how they will spend their money. It comes at a time, though, when surrounding states are giving guaranteed raises to teachers, a big bump in Tennessee, for instance. Why the different strategy here?
Well, teachers, and it's a great question, because we're under a little bit different scenario. You got to go back to the old CURA Act and the judgment that was entered talking about the equalization of funding. Judge Ray Corns and I think it was Burt Combs who represented school systems, that we're required to make sure each county has equivalent funding, and you hear about the SEEK formula. So to try to take things outside the SEEK formula really disrupts that which has been held constitutionally permissible. So we looked at it, and teachers are not state employees. You know, the person that works at the local garage or a social worker, they're state employees. The local school system has to make that judgment. So we felt by putting 3% increase in the SEEK allotment, which is that equalization formula, 6% in year 2, 3% in year 1, plus changing what's called the tier 1 factor, that went from 15% to 17.5%. And I know this is wonky. That gets more dollars back into the classroom, along with taking up and going to 90% of covering transportation to 100% in year 2. That's over $110 million put into the system, above and beyond what we put into the SEEK allotment.
Senator, let me ask you this. You could have put money for and directed money to teachers' raises, right? I mean, there's nothing illegal or unconstitutional about doing that.
No, there's not. But when you put that in conjunction with the SEEK formula, if you try to do that, some districts will actually, if you were to mandate a percentage raise, they could actually lose money and have less money and not enough through the SEEK formula, particularly probably more wealthy districts, because that's what the SEEK formula does. It balances it. So a 9% increase over the 2-year period, what we heard, that will give them, plus the monies into transportation, should allow most districts to do somewhere around a 5% raise each year.
The Safer Kentucky Act, which is House Bill 5, a comprehensive crime bill, was praised by some, criticized by some. It enhances penalties for several crimes. Some have had concerns about the unaddressed cost of additional incarceration as being one area of concern. The other, of course, has been the talk about the homelessness piece. What will that bill do?
Well, first of all, when people think about what government should do, public protection should be one of our key and core reasons to do things. So when you look at that, 3 violent crimes, and you got to look at the definition of a violent crime. That's stabbing somebody, shooting somebody, using a gun and a weapon, serious physical injury 3 times before, that's I think that's pretty reasonable. If you commit a violent crime 3 times, that you would then have that type of long sentence. The other goes back to something we already kind of hit on, the homeless issue, mental health, substance use disorder. If you look at it, people are saying, well, you can't be at a park, you're going to get arrested. No, it's not arrested. You have to do that multiple times. But what you will see before it becomes a Class B misdemeanor, 90 days in jail, up to 90 days in jail, up to a $250 fine. But that allows people to get them into homeless shelters, to get mental health evaluations, to get substance use disorder treatment. And so that is kind of where we think, and a lot of us thought, that we could attack this homeless issue, this mental health issue, by getting individuals into the system, which goes back to the need to purchase the property from Transylvania.
Do you think that will be significant enough to really put a dent in this problem?
As I understand it, that's going to be close to a $30 million project overall.
And that is Lexington, but the
Yes.
homelessness problem we're seeing in all of the communities, particularly the medium size, the Richmonds and Somersets and Frankforts and Georgetowns are really seeing this as a continuing issue. Nicholasville.
Yeah, and I'm going to go there,
Yep.
but let's go to Louisville. Louisville's doing something similar. They're doing what's called a C3, which is for homeless, mental health, and differing individuals. They're putting $22.5 million. We did that. Plus they're matching it. So there's going to be close to $50 million there, $30 million in Lexington. But then there's another $20 million for the housing, the rural housing fund, which can be used to that. Now, communities are going to have to come together to reach out to get those monies. Plus, you need to look at the monies we put into substance use disorder. Basically, a lot of people will call it drug treatment. We have put a lot of money in those areas, which I think you get into dual diagnosis. You don't know if it's a mental health issue first that gets you into drugs, or drugs that get you into mental health issue. We put a lot of money there, and that's a big cause or factor.
And sometimes it is neither. It is somebody who just has nowhere to go, and they're kicked out because they missed a paycheck or two.
Well, that's true, but that's generally a very limited number. You generally see more of this being in the realm of a substance use disorder or a mental health issue.
What else are you glad to see becoming law?
Oh, there were a lot of different things that we were able to do. You've talked about the budget. And I think one of the things in the budget a lot of people won't look at is, money in education, but economic development. We gave the cabinet a lot of money to go out and develop sites. SK Blue Oval. We need those sites that are ready. Water, sewer, electricity, we have a lot of money there. Roads, it's always critical to have roads. We've talked about that. We looked at different things like, let's go to Hazard, which you'll have a big presence over there. And it's not the rotations for a psychiatric residency over there. That's big. Because of the mental health issue.
You have a study for a 4-year university at Hazard, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
Low baccalaureate attainment levels, some of the worst in the state, some of the worst in the nation. You got to be fiscally responsible. You got to understand the sequencing. So we've asked the Council on Post-Secondary Education to look at that, to see what would it cost, how would you sequence it, cost having two factors, capital construction and creation, and then what continuing maintenance and operation would be.
Why did the Senate put the brakes on proposed a College of Osteopathic Medicine at EKU and a College of Veterinary Medicine at Murray State, even though we know, Senator, there are significant shortages in those areas?
Here's two things. Put the brakes on, maybe let's say we tapped them. Let's don't say we stopped it. Let's just say we slowed it down. The same thing you just asked me about was Hazard, and taking that look and seeing what the true costs are. Is it viable or feasible? Is it the right place to put it? So is it the right place to put a veterinarian center at Murray? What is the real cost going to be? Let's get an outside independent look. Let's talk to Southern Association of Colleges and Schools and the accreditation groups to make sure we're doing the right thing. The money's there. The timing and the charge to CPE is there. That next year when we come into session, if they come back and say, oh, hey, yeah, Murray needs this, or they may come back and say, well, maybe it should be at UK instead of Murray, or maybe the osteopathic school isn't needed at all.
Well, is there some of that in state politics going on? I mean, that universities are struggling among themselves?
Naturally, there is. And that's one of the things I hate to see. Let's be competitors on the athletic field, but let's be collaborators and partners in the academic realm.
There was an attempt by Democratic Senator David Yates to force a vote on a bill that would grant exceptions in cases of rape or incest to Kentucky's abortion ban. It was an issue in the governor's race a few months ago. Yates pushed a discharge petition, an attempt to get a vote on the floor. You said it was out of order.
I did, and it was. Think about this. Under the Constitution, you have to have 3 readings before you can vote on it in any chamber, and he brought it up the last day. So it can't get the readings that are required by the Constitution. Second, if you read the rule, it says you shall file it and then ask it to be called the next day for action. Well, if you bring it up on that last day, it can't be called the next day for action because by Constitution, we're adjourned. And so it made it totally out of order.
Would it have gone down in defeat in your chamber if it had come to a vote?
I don't know. I really don't know. We've talked about that before, Bill, that this is a tough issue. And there's division in both caucuses, in both chambers, about how to deal with a child and a mother who has had a criminal act performed on her.
Kentucky voters will decide whether to ratify a school choice amendment proposed by the legislature. Governor Beshear and the Lieutenant Governor Coleman say they'll campaign against it every day. Will you be involved in the passage or defeat of that amendment?
I'm going to go out, and I hope the governor and lieutenant governor don't campaign on it every day, because there's a lot of other things that need to be done in this state than out campaigning on an issue. I think the two can survive and thrive in this world. And particularly in the metropolitan areas, we've seen a lot of problems, more so in JCPS, Jefferson County. I'm going to make my opinion known.
So you are for the amendment?
I am, because
which would put in the legislature's lap to then set up the rules.
Figure out what to do. That's right, to set up the rules. And I find it kind of intriguing. You've looked at this, charter schools. It doesn't have to go to a private institution. It can actually be a private entity working with a public school system.
Do you have concerns that some of the money would be siphoned away from traditional public schools?
No, I don't. And that's one of the things why we've tried to make the statement of funding so strongly this budget without a mandate that public schools need to exist and be strong.
There was an attempt to change the state's open records laws in a way that would put some communications out of reach of the public and reporters. Do you see that coming back in another form?
I do. And here is the problem you get. You put public officials in a really tough position because we're citizen legislators, and it's a little bit different for us than it is the executive branch. I could have a public phone and was at one time given a public phone, but then all of a sudden Bill Bryant has my number and decides to call me not knowing what it is on a personal issue. And it's like, wait a minute, you're using a public phone for personal business, or your child calls you or something like that. How to separate those two? And I thought, I don't want to be accused of using public or government property for private use, so I gave it up. And I do a lot.
Do you think that'll be discussed in the interim?
I do believe so.
What else in the interim do you think? A few seconds left here now.
I think you'll see additional to see where we are on the budget. Everything we've done also has been done with us focusing on reducing taxes. And we've been able to continue to do and spend the way we spend while all in the meantime reducing everybody's taxes.
Do you think the next decrease in the state income tax will happen as a result of what happened in this session?
If things stay consistent, and this is economic forecasting and things can change, we can have a 9/11, we can have a COVID, something in the Middle East could happen, and that could change the economic dynamics. But if everything stays consistent, I think we have a good shot at it.
Senate President Robert Stivers, thanks for coming. We appreciate it.
Glad to.
We'll be back, and we'll get some info from Fayette County PVA David O'Neill about the increase in property values and therefore the taxes on Kentucky Newsmakers. Welcome back now to Kentucky Newsmakers from WKYT. Fayette County home values have jumped substantially over the last decade or so, and so have the property taxes. But the reassessments have caught some people off guard recently. Some say they'll have to move because they can't afford their tax bills. It's all part of a major home affordability problem that is nationwide and certainly being felt locally. The property valuation administrator in Fayette County is David O'Neill, and he's joining us now with some answers as to all of this. Welcome. We appreciate you coming in.
Well, thank you for having me. I appreciate it.
For those suddenly getting higher tax bills and assessments on their property, what should they know?
Well, what they should know is that it's based on sales, and it's based on, we find comparable sales, 5 comparable sales for every home. We look for homes that are in the immediate neighborhood and as much like that house as possible. So preferably very close in the same square footage, the same number of bathrooms, whether it has a basement or not, or a garage. And then we make adjustments for differences between those two properties, and then that's how we arrive at the value, based on adjusting the sale prices. And so when we send out the notifications and we notify homeowners of the new property values, we also include the list of those comps so they can go on the website and kind of look for themselves, and we're open to hearing if they've got comps of their own that they'd like for us to take a look at.
How often is that reassessment done?
It's typically done once every 4 years. We go out and we inspect every property in Fayette County once every 4 years. I've got the county divided up into about 300 different residential neighborhoods, and I do a fourth of those every year. So it's about 25 or 30,000 that we do each year. Now there are special circumstances sometimes where we might do it within a 3-year period, but that's pretty rare. It's more often that we may go 5 or 6 years because things happen like, for example, in 2020 during COVID, with government and industry shut down, we just weren't able to do an entire year's worth of reassessment. So we had to spread those out over a couple years.
How have the property values shot up over the last 10 years?
Well, we've been in a very robust housing market for a good solid 10 years, since about 2014, and median sale price has exactly doubled in that period of time. So median means half of them are lower, half of them are higher. So you could have bought pretty much the home of your choice, within your price range for $150,000 or so in 2014. Today, that price is going to be over $300,000. And so, since we base assessments on sale prices, and the Constitution says we have to assess at 100% fair cash value, that means those sale prices are bringing up assessments.
What does gentrification do in neighborhoods when somebody comes in and buys a property and significantly improves it and then maybe flips it at a higher price, and that happens several times, then suddenly the whole neighborhood sees higher taxes, right?
There's no longer a neighborhood in Fayette County that's not desirable. They're all desirable, and they're all going up significantly. So it used to be the concept of gentrification is that people would come in, buy the properties that were previously owner occupied, turn them into rentals, fix them up a little bit, and then there's usually an element of displacement with gentrification. And so now with affordable housing being even a worse crisis than just housing affordability, it left people with nowhere to go. Because we're not building any houses in Fayette County anymore under $200,000, not a single one.
As Lexington grows and people keep calling for more affordable housing, the city has built and subsidized some low-income housing, but as the developers come in and will not build anything less than $200,000, that's its own problem.
That's its own problem. So you've got affordable housing, and you've got, which is kind of a federal definition, and that's your subsidized housing. Then you've got housing affordability, which is, regular people just looking for a different house, and whether or not they can afford what they're shopping for.
Where do you see this all going? Well, Fayette County they have tried to make it more enticing for developers to build more affordable housing. It just never seems to work out.
It doesn't seem to work out. Like I said, we're not building any houses right now under $200,000, but beyond that, since the end of the recession back around 2010, 2011, we're only building 500 houses a year in Fayette County, total. And so that's not near the number that we need to be bringing on to satisfy the demand. The supply continues to weaken, and demand continues to grow, and that's what pricing's all about, is supply and demand. Yep. The interest rates remaining high right now is a little bit of a problem, because there are folks who would like to be in the market and buy a new house, but they don't want to give up that 2.5% or 3% interest rate that they've locked in. So when interest rate starts coming back down again, I believe that will shake loose some supply, but it's also going to shake loose some demand. So I don't see housing prices going down in the foreseeable future.
There is a little bit of help for older Kentuckians with the homestead exemption, but even that is not the relief it once was, right?
That's right. So my office administers the homestead exemption, and that's for folks who are 65 years of age or older or disabled. And it takes off this year it takes off about $46,000 off the taxable value that you pay taxes on. Now, when that was first introduced a number of years ago,
is that an average, or that's for any property?
It's a set dollar amount.
Okay.
Yeah, set dollar amount. So regardless of what size house you get,
gotcha.
You have a $46,000 deduction. That worked out to be about 25% of your tax bill back when it was first introduced. Well, the homestead exemption is increased based on the consumer price index, whereas home prices, it's just a free market, right? So home prices have outpaced the homestead exemption, and now it's only worth about 15 or 16% of your tax bill. So I think there's an opportunity there for the legislature to step in and increase the homestead exemption. There was discussion of that in the last session. That was a busy session. They didn't get to it, but hopefully they will address that again soon.
If people do want to dispute their property tax in Lexington, what does that process look like?
Well, that's where we are right now. Every year we have a protest period, and it runs from about April 15th up through the third Monday in May. So May the 20th, end of day, Monday, May the 20th. Don't let that day come and go without talking to us if you want to go through the protest process. And we've moved it. One of the benefits of the lockdown during COVID was we've moved the protest entirely to the website. So you can, in the comfort of your own home, in the middle of the night, log in. It's a 30-second process to fill out the application, and then somebody in my office will be back to you within a business day.
How likely is that to result in somebody's liability being reduced?
It's worth it to go through the process. Because,
chances are?
Yeah, because we use 5 comparable sales to arrive at your value, but that really gives us a value range that we can work at. And so what we want to know is, how does your house compare to the average house in the neighborhood, and do you have some deferred maintenance? Is it dated? Has it been 25 years since you added a kitchen? Do you only have 1 bathroom when everybody else has 2? These are the things that affect value.
Anything else we should know about this controversy of the moment?
FayettePVA.com, the lower left-hand corner of the screen, you'll find the protest stuff. We could not have made it any easier, and we really do mean it, that we want you to go through the process if you think you need to.
All right. David O'Neill is the Fayette County PVA. Thanks for being here. We appreciate
Thank you,
it.
sir.
Stay with us. We'll wrap up Kentucky Newsmakers in a moment. We certainly appreciate you being with us for this edition of Kentucky Newsmakers. Invite you for the latest news later today on WKYT. And of course, the news is always on WKYT.com and on our WKYT News app. We hope you make it a good week ahead.